Greetings, ICS. Let me start by saying my name's Jay Norris. I'm the CEO, co-founder of Guesst. We are an end-to-end software solution for retailers and brands. Waiting for this to get up. Also, I have my team here. This is Alan Mock. All right, head of retail experience. We have Mike Cortazzo, who runs head of retail operations. We have Ronnie, head of brand development, and Edward, COO and co-founder. I'm waiting for the presentation, let's start by talking about my background. I worked years ago in the music business, putting together tours for a guy named Clive Davis, and working for artists such as Celine Dion, Whitney Houston, Biggie, and I'm only telling you this story because it really has a lot of context to why we're doing what we're doing now. So my job was to go out, take the artists, find the venue, set up the shows, and we had small budgets. So we couldn't figure out how to execute these events. And I decided to reach across to other categories and have them sponsor these events. So for instance, if there was a performance with Whitney Houston in a certain market, we had a $5,000 budget. The space was $10,000. I said, wow. So let's talk to some of the players in other categories, such as wine and spirit categories, Moet Hennessy, other players. So they came in as almost event sponsorships. So I had a chance, once I segued out of the music business and I got into retail real estate, I saw an opportunity to create strategic partnerships with brands that were complementary to each other. So that was really how we started the Guesst movement and community. It really is about partnerships on the ground. And here we go. So we start by saying how we feel will save retail. Is it working? On the side. There we go. Wow, Ed. Okay. So we all heard about this, whatever they're in the news, retail apocalypse, right? At Guesst, we don't believe in that. We think that retail just needs to be reimagined. Okay? We have these 4 buckets. When I first started this journey about 4 years ago, there was disparity between the landlords that wanted the 10-year leases and the brands that I knew that only could afford pop-ups or temporary space. So that's that bucket there. The D2C brands we know are what we call in like Mars. They have their own network. They do not touch heritage retailers. And we have the new models here. New models such as Bulletin, Betas, Furpost. These are new models that are coming out, and we call those the WeWorks for retail. And then we have the consumer experience, something that I think everyone's hearing more about, how you need to create content and compelling experiences at brick and mortar in order to sustain yourself. Okay, so we feel is that we need to find a balance. And at Guesst, we've created streamlined partnerships, all right, between, we feel, landlords, retailers, and brands have an opportunity to create better partnerships, right? As long as there's data to sustain that. And so here's the embrace of the new retail. So we have Furpost, we have Beta, we have Public School here, and we have others. What we're seeing is you'll see hundreds of these in the next couple of years, we feel, because not only is the economics right, but the experiences are more compelling because it gives it an opportunity to uncover and discover new brands. Okay, here's some of the D2C native brands that are hitting the market these days that are also looking for physical retail. Okay, now here's the blue sky moments, right? So we all know that all the industries have been disrupted. I really want to talk about, from a transportation perspective, from a hospitality perspective, and I didn't even mention Spotify that kind of disrupted the music business when I was in it. So I had a chance to see this and say, a lot of people call it disruption. I think it's just reinvention. And I really want to make sure that Guesst becomes a part of that reinvention. Go ahead. Next slide. Okay, I'm going to bring it to Alan Mock. Alan's a partner, but he's also an owner of a very relevant, culturally relevant brand called Public School.
Hello. Great. My name's Alan. I'm from Public School. I'm one of the managing partners at Public School. And that's good. Yeah. One of the managing partners at Public School. And what we are is we are a men's and women's brand. And at our peak, what we used to do was we worked in the wholesale retail dynamic, where we sold to over 200 doors worldwide. We were in basically the who's who of retailers. We were in Barney's, Bergdorf, Saks, Galeries Lafayette, Isetan, Harvey Nichols. We sold to all these high-end stores, and what we were seeing within the space was it was a challenging space, and the retail environment was changing. And one of the things that we were noticing was that we had very little control over our brand narrative when we were operating in that space. And when I say that, I mean that we sold to all these great retailers. They all told the brand story, but they all told it in slightly different ways. For a brand like us, where we have true cultural currency, where we actually believe that our brand stands for something, and we have a very specific message that we're trying to convey to people. While being in these retailers, the way that they would tell the brand story would always be a little bit different. And it wasn't bad per se, but it was just a little bit different. Saks would tell it one way, Barney's would tell it a different way. And when I say that they would tell it differently, it was not just verbal things that they would say, but oftentimes what it would be very simple things and very subtle things, like brand adjacencies. Who would sit next to within any one of these different stores that would indicate to consumers what we stood for as a brand. That wasn't always a good thing. And it became confusing for customers who were new to our brand or didn't know anything about our brand. Customers who already knew about us, they didn't need that education. But for all these new consumers that we were trying to get, to have that confusing message became difficult for us to really grow our brand. And for about 2 years' time, we were thinking about this shift over to direct-to-consumer. And in 2008, or 2018, I should say, we made this shift. And we made this shift over to direct-to-consumer in a wholehearted way, where we completely abandoned the old wholesale retail dynamic, and we shifted our business strictly to direct-to-consumer. And what that meant was it wasn't just a matter of selling online, but we at Public School are big believers in brick and mortar. And the way that we treat brick and mortar is we think of it as an extension to the online experience, where the brick and mortar experience is supposed to offer something that is compelling, that's something that's different, that you simply can't achieve strictly in the online world. We opened up our store on 3 Howard Street in Soho in New York City. And within that space, we treat it as part commerce, part gallery. The front portion of our store is where we conduct commerce. The back portion of the store, we've treated that as a gallery space. And in the time that we've been open, we've had multiple activations within the space. The first activation that we had was with Nike. We've done an activation with a vintage polo collector, a vintage polo, not polo as in the sport, but polo as in the apparel brand, vintage polo collector. And most recently, we did an activation with Fun City Tattoos, which is New York City's oldest tattoo shop. And they were in our space for a month. And the whole entire idea there is, how can we make the retail experience something that is experiential and not just transactional? On the transactional side, certainly what we see is we want to be able to really understand who our customer is. We want to be able to speak to our customer in a very clear, succinct way, where we can be completely on brand with what it is that we're doing. When I first met Jay, one of the things that we talked about was, how do we capture data about our consumers and that whole entire customer journey? In the old retail model, we weren't able to do that. What we would get is weekly sell-through reports from these retailers, and these were aggregated numbers where we knew that X number of whatever sold, but we knew nothing about that actual transaction, what the customer looked like, what size they were, what the geographies were. We didn't know any of that. And in talking to Jay, one of the things that we kept on talking about was, how do we capture that data so that we can know what future demand is going to look like, how we can better predict what that demand is going to look like, what sizes do we need to refill, what colors do we need to refill. And all that stuff is something that we talk in detail about. And we've built a lot of that into the Guesst platform.
This is Allen's space in Soho, New York, guys. The public school space, which is a collective.
So within our space over here, the way that we think about it is, how do we create an immersive retail environment where it's just not a stagnant thing, where people come in and just look at a shirt, look at a jacket, give you the credit card, walk out with something. So what we really wanted to do was reimagine the space where we've got the activations, we're bringing in different brands that are complementary to our brand, where we share the same worldview and share the same sensibilities, so that what we can create within the space is something that is far more dynamic and far more interesting than the traditional retail space. And that's where we go back to some of the activations that we've done. Those activations, like I said before, aren't strictly commerce-based, but they are experience-based.
Ronnie, oh, guys, this is Ronnie's up. He's the head of brand development. Now, we found Ronnie because we've been looking for the right subject matter experts. We have Alan because we wanted to have that perspective from a brand and a retailer perspective. And Ronnie worked in the trade show industry with a major line called Liberty Fairs, which is known for like very current brands. So go ahead, Ronnie, tell me the story. Why Guesst?
Hey everybody, really happy to be here. I think my lane in supporting my team here is wrangling brands, and actually when we talk about that D2C space where you're seeing that the online retail market is being saturated and the consumer is not changing in the aspect of still wanting that touch and feel experience and opportunity, that's where Guesst comes in and says, how can we go ahead and activate a space? How can a brand still show up the same way they show up online, but in reality and in real life? But also Guesst has that special push and oomph in powering that experience as far as the POS transaction, the staff, the person that they come in contact with. And then to Alan's point, when we talk about brand adjacencies, making sure that the products and the brands that are going into a space make sense. A lot of tenants or our hosts that we have at Guesst, their big concern is normally saying, I'm particular about the brand that I want to bring into my space because I know my consumer is X, Y, and Z. And so I either want to refresh my space or I want to introduce them to something else. Or the best part or the sweet spot is always, I want a new consumer. And so we're looking at this cohabitation, co-retailing space to be, one, an opportunity to test retailers, test brands, and test the consumer market, but then also refresh and still drive consumers into the retail space. So that's how I support my team here, and be glad to talk to anybody after the presentation.
Great. Edward.
So real quick, I'm going to just talk through, we have kind of five, at its core, Guesst is really a technology platform, an agnostic technology platform that's available for brands and retailers to use, to connect, to transact together. We have five core feature sets, the first of which is our profiles. So retail hosts could build very detailed listings that go through their locations, multiple locations, and details out all the different pop sharing opportunities that are available at those locations. Brands can build robust profiles that have everything from product categories to preferred brand adjacencies to lookbooks and full product catalogs. When we capture all of this information about brands and retailers, the resulting profiles give us the ability to really push smart recommendations about about brands and retailers who should be connecting, who should be working with one another. Our in-app messenger system has all kinds of built-in tools that make negotiation, brings a lot of automation to it, removes a lot of friction from that negotiation, that deal-making process. So Guesst brands and host retailers can land at the right kind of placement fee, the right kind of revenue splits, and all of that goes into a smart contract. We have a very powerful inventory management system. So when brands onboard their products, they can either do it manually, or if they have a Shopify store, we're able to import all of that. All of those products then live in our system. It makes it very easy for host retailers to start to curate what kind of products they want from those brands in their stores. And all of that pushes out then to a very seamless shipping and tracking flow. And then from our inventory management system, everything goes into our POS. We give the POS to retail hosts for free. It's free to use. And then all of those Guesst brands just seamlessly populate POS system from our inventory management, and then all of that data, the transactional data, information that gets captured by customers, that's shared between hosts and guests, and then all of our payment, all the payouts are very seamless and happen directly from our platform. So ultimately, this is a digital platform for all retail stakeholders, and we have a little time left. Mike can talk about.
Go ahead. Mike Cortazzo, operations.
My name is Mike Cortazzo. I'm Director of Retail Operations for Guesst. My DNA is I spent over 20 years with American Eagle Outfitters and Aerie as Senior Director of Operations and Real Estate. The reason I'm involved here is because I see a tremendous opportunity with the Guesst platform. I've implemented many forms of retail technology, all separate pieces, 3 or 4 point of sale systems. I've implemented merchandise allocation systems, back office reporting systems, all separate and all, for the most part, excruciatingly difficult to implement. What I saw here in the Guesst package of software and systems is a one-stop shop. It handles everything end to end for the retailer. The other reason I'm involved is I thought, I work in real estate, I work in operations, and I see this opportunity of vacant space in malls and in other centers. And I see the landlords trying to put something together that's creative in these centers. So I got together with Jay and said, listen, there's an opportunity here if we do our own collective and curate our own brands and operate our own locations. There's a lot of spaces out there. And yesterday we had some great meetings over at Caesars with some big landlords who are now willing to do much more creative deals than they were 2 or 3 years ago. So we see this as a good space going forward for Guesst.
Great point, Mike. So, I mean, now I'm glad you guys met the team and you see what we're building here, subject matter experts in each area. And, you know, when we first started this journey, it was really about keeping businesses in place in physical retail. And that's really the core DNA for Guesst, is making sure tenants can sustain themselves in this business and prosper. Beginning with Mike, we also talked to a lot of landlords that had vacant space, and they wish to, of course, uncover great brands, D2C brands, indie brands, who don't have an opportunity to take space because they just don't have all the bells and whistles. They don't have staffing ability. They don't understand retail operations. So that's why we connected on that endeavor. But this is, we're in an interesting space right now, all of us in this room, in retail and real estate, I know it. And so we'd love to collaborate with you and talk to you about our Guesst community, because we're growing. And thank you for the time.